So I've literally just run down from the dining room. So regardless of the fact that the doomsayers and the naysayers are still calling for huge property crashes, and there is geopolitical unrest in the Middle East, which we'll talk about later, the reality is confidence appears high, both in the future and the prospects of the UK property market, and also the UK economy. Now, I want to dive into that on this live stream, and I want to talk about is this optimism unfounded? Are we sleepwalking into a recession that is going to take down the property market? Or have we actually weathered the worst of it and we are bottoming out? Okay, so that is what we're going to look at in this evening's live stream. So a very good evening to everybody. I can apologize profusely for not being live for the last week and a half. My diary has been absolutely manic. I've been launching a new product, a new program called the Property Unicorn Club, which I'll talk to you about later. I've also been up in Chester, getting my current project up and running to hit the short-term market, as well as spending some time with my kids, and dealing with various other business aspects over the last week and a half. So I just haven't had time to go live. So I want to do a sweep up of what we've missed over the last week and a half, to see where we are as we go into the interest rate decision, which I believe is tomorrow, the next MPC meeting. So we are live. So if you can see me and hear me, please give me a thumbs up and please type something in the comments. I can see Stuart and Tor Rhythm are on. It's a pleasure to be back. And as always, if you are new to the channel, this is the first time you're watching one of these live streams. My aim on these live streams is to go through the actual data so we can see what's going on and understand what's going on underneath the headlines of the mainstream media, and also a lot of the a lot of the headlines that are on the YouTube sphere with the polarized views that we often see. So my aim is to bring reality, to bring objectivity to the actual data so we can make better decisions as investors and home buyers and business owners over the coming months and years. So let's crack onto it, or on with it even. Okay, first thing to talk about is we have seen some positives over the last week come out in the data. So I want to go through the positives that we've seen, look at the data that backs it up, and then look at the counter argument to this, the negatives, and look at the data that backs that up, so we can get an idea about what the direction of travel actually is right now. So let's start with swap rates. Actually, if we look at the swap rates, and I'm just going to get them up right here, which I should have. Swap rates have actually come up a little bit. So 5-year, sorry, that's the wrong button. 5-year SONIA swap, we can see is at 3.743. We have seen it lower than that. You can see on December it was 3.347. So we're seeing the swap rates actually come up a little bit. This means the market is maybe backtracking slightly based on what they were looking at in December, which was a broad consensus of 4 quarter-point percentage falls in 2024 in the interest rates, take us probably 1% down to where we are now by the time we get to the end of this year. I would suggest the swap rates are implying that it doesn't think it's going to be quite so aggressive, but we are still fairly low compared to where we were. Now, how does this play out into mortgages? Because this is one of the big ones, and what we are seeing is we're seeing a repeat or a continued drop in new mortgages for home buyers. So if we look at this, we can see down the end here in January we've seen some quite rapid fall off in these graphs. This particular one stands out for me, which is 85% loan to value, 2-year fixed rate, which has come down from 5.4 to 4.97, so 0.5%, over the last few weeks. These are averages out on the market. Now, what this is doing with swap rates kind of lower as they are, with average mortgage rates coming down, is it's increasing the affordability. Okay, so it means when people are coming off their fixed rate debt, they're not having to jack up as much as possible. And we talk about so many times that the things that are going to cause a full-on market meltdown in the UK property market is number 1, affordability, number 2, negative equity, and number 3, unemployment. So looking at the affordability, we're going to look at a couple of other things, and then I'm going to get to the negative equity and the unemployment in a little bit. So we're seeing the swap rates still sub 4, okay, so 3.5 to 3.7%. I'm also seeing a lot more analytics or analysts giving now an upgraded growth outlook for the UK economy compared to what they were doing in November. as well as that forecast of inflation coming down much more quickly than it was a few months ago. So the analysts are going, right, outlook for UK GDP is looking more rosy. Looks like we might be able to return to some sort of growth in 2024 rather than recession. So whether we go technical recession right now, we're still waiting for December's data to come out, see if we go into a technical recession. But even if we do go into a technical recession, it doesn't necessarily mean it's falling off a cliff at the moment, okay? And lower inflation coming down is easing things. So let's also talk about that affordability matrix. So with affordability, we are seeing again, or now seeing real-term wage increases due to the inflation dropping off quickly. And even though and I haven't got the data up because we looked at it last time, even though the peak, it looks like we've seen the peak of wage increases, it's still decently above inflation right now. So that's improving people's affordability. Utility prices, despite the geopolitical issues that we'll talk about in a bit, are actually looking fairly resilient. So if we go over back into the data set, let's start with crude. So with the events in the Middle East at the moment, there was a narrative that we're going to see a spike in crude, which of course is then going to filter into the supply chain, which of course is then going to impact on inflation, and that's going to create issues with interest rate calls. If we zoom out, look at the last 5 years chart, we can see we have had a tick up since December, but it's nothing like what a lot of people were calling for. Okay, so 2022 we had the big spike. We then had a tick up in the summer of last year, 2023 into September, which peaked about sort of 90. I think we're just low 90s a barrel. And then we've been dropping off back down into the sort of mid 70s. And yes, we have crept up a little bit. We're still only just above 80. So we're not seeing, that supply of crude be choked and therefore the price go up. What I think is more interesting is when we look at the cost of natural gas. So again, utilities, as we all know, the height of the inflation, we're seeing a massive spike in utilities, gas, electricity. Up at, what's this, 650, per therm, came down. And in sort of mid 2023, again, we're dropping down here to, sort of mid 50s. We were starting to see a general creep up again, okay, into the end of the autumn, early winter of 2023, but it's come down. It's come down and it's looking stable. So what does this mean? What can we take from this? When we're looking to the energy price cap, we're already forecast to see in Q3 the energy price cap come down considerably. I can't remember the exact figures where we are now. I think we're about 1,900 a year on the energy price cap. Forecast come down to about 1,600. That's a fairly big percentage drop. And then we look at where the wholesale gas is right now. It looks like that can be sustained rather than a temporary dip before it comes back in. When we look at affordability, CPI and that basket of goods, as we talk about over and over and over again, such a poor reflection of the actual buying power or purchasing power or affordability of somebody, based on what they're actually spending their money on. It's not a reflective basket of goods. The reality is most people are spending most of their money on food and shelter. Shelter, of course, includes things like utilities. So housing services are going to include utilities. So rent, mortgage, utilities, and then your food, right? So utilities are a big part of that because, of course, it feeds into the whole supply chain. So they're not looking like they are going up. So they're looking stably down. And then we also look at the cut in national insurance contributions that comes in April. So this is going to give an additional sort of boost to when we look at, and we looked at the charts of who benefits from this. And actually I was quite surprised because I think there's a big narrative out there that for the next, so we got two things at play. We have number one, the national insurance cut, which comes in April. We also have the stealth taxes in terms of income tax freeze over the next 5 years. So of course, with income tax levels freezing, as people's salaries go up with wage growth, more people are going to go into basic and higher and then additional. So there's going to be a big tax, it's called fiscal drag, basically a lot more tax collected by keeping the income tax levels level. However, when you look at it this year, 24 into 25, the net effect is that the majority of people will benefit from the drop in national insurance compared to the fiscal drag effect of their income tax going up. And if I had time, and again, sorry, I've been coaching my Property Cashflow Accelerator clients for 4 hours this afternoon, so I've just managed to get a bit of food and come back and do this. When you look at that graph, and I'll dig it out and we'll look at it next time, there's only a very small percentage of people that are going to be negatively advantaged, are going to be disadvantaged by it in the next financial year. So actually, this is also improving affordability. So when we look at those factors that hit UK house prices, affordability, negative equity, and unemployment, actually that affordability objectively is improving for people. When you look at it on a macro scale, look, I'm aware that there are going to be many different demographics, many subsections of some people will be disadvantaged, some people will be way more advantaged, okay? When you look at savers, for example, they're going to be more advantaged. You see lower income families with variable mortgages are clearly going to be disproportionately disadvantaged. But macro-wise, which is what we have to do when we look at the market, right? It is almost impossible to suggest that affordability is not improving right now compared to where we were last year. So these are the cases, these are the factors that could go into, I don't know whether soft landing is the word anymore. I think we've been in a soft landing the whole time with the property market. We've never had that capitulation. These are the things that are going to prop up the market. I'm not necessarily going to talk about go back into growth right away, but prop up the market over the next 3 to 6 months. So if those are the positives, and I'd love to know your thoughts on that, by the way, and I'll go through questions at the end as I've gone through all the slides. If those are the positives that are propping the market up, what's the reverse of that? What are the negatives that are potentially going to take us down? So the first thing to talk about is swap rates cannot go down forever, and mortgage rates cannot go down forever. If we go back to the swap rates, we can actually see that potentially, they've peaked, they've troughed already. End of December, 3.34. They cannot continue going down until Bank of England starts to show the direction that it's going to take interest rates. Okay, remember, a swap rate is effectively a hedge, and it's a bet, if you like, about what the average interest rate will be in that time period. So over the next 5 years, it's saying the average interest rate is going to be 3.743%. That's what the market is saying right now. In December, it was lower than that. Which means that the market thinks it's not going to go down as low over the next 5 years. So the average is going to be higher than it was sort of a month ago. Okay, so they can't go on forever. And these mortgage rates, so forget about the swap rates, forget about Bank of England base rate. Sorry, I'm not actually showing you the right thing here. The mortgage rates, we can see we've been in steady decline since summer 23 in terms of mortgage rates. We have seen a capitulation, I would say, since beginning of January, with a lot of lenders aggressively dropping interest rates. This cannot continue. So this will not continue in a linear straight line. And don't forget, a lot of these mortgage products that are having interest rates reduced are probably seeing fees go up or are only available for a very small amount of customers who qualify for these particular ones, okay? So this cannot go on forever. So it's not like we're going to continue to see that affordability improve for people, okay? It will bottom at some point. And then that takes me to the next thing, is the gap. The thing I've been talking about since I started this channel in March. And the gap is the amount of people who are coming off their fixed rate mortgages versus the interest rates they're going on to. So if you think about, and now actually the gap, so let me try and illustrate this with my hands. If we've got this amount of people, this amount of people coming off the fixed rate, so this amount of people on fixed rate, this line is the amount that people are going on to on their variable rate. That gap was getting bigger and bigger. So less people on cheap fixed rate, more people jumping up onto higher, variable rates as they have to, or it could be fixed as they refix. That gap was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We are still seeing these people, and it's still, I think it's 1.6 million roughly in 2024 people having to refinance coming off their cheap fixed rate. Admittedly, what they're going on to is less than it was, sort of 6 months ago. But we're still seeing a lot of people have affordability impacted by coming off cheap fixed rate debt. So that will continue to impact probably the most vulnerable subsector of demographic in the housing market, which are probably, again, young families, not a lot of disposable income, are going to be disproportionately skewed by mortgage payments going up. So that's the gap. The next thing we've got to look at is April. We have a load of Brexit costs filter into the system. And what I mean by Brexit costs is additional costs for imports, exports, various treaties. I've not looked too much into it, but I know in April we have a raft of things come into place, which is going to make it more expensive to import various things into the UK because of Brexit. So that will probably feed into the supply chain. It's also worth mentioning, because we've done it on the plus side, but it's also a negative, is that national insurance contribution. When that dips, will that create a secondary inflationary effect by giving more purchasing power to people? And if effectively, sorry, not the national insurance. So the national insurance will potentially put more purchasing power in people's hands. But the other thing is the minimum wage, national minimum wage, going up by, for some demographics, almost 20%, which is a significant boost up in their income. How much will that ripple through the food chain, if you like? So how much will that impact everybody else as we get into April? Will there be a lot of people looking for more pay rises as that gets reflected in their companies? And will that create a secondary inflationary effect? So that's something we wait to see. Actually, the logic says yes. The research I've done implies on a theoretical level, actually it'll have more burden on employers and ends up increasing unemployment, because rather than giving everybody additional pay rises, employers have to start saving money by cutting headcount rather than just giving everybody pay rises, especially as we go into more tightening of the economy. So that's something to bear in mind. Also, let's not forget, we are still not tamed inflation. We're not at 2%. We're not sub 2%, right? We're still almost double target. And we're going into the period now where is it going to stick? We always talked about January, February, March this year. Are we going to see that stickiness in the inflation? And what will that do to impact the decisions that the bank are going to be making as we talk about the potential interest rate cuts? So number 5 we want to talk about in the negatives is the geopolitical issues that we are seeing right now. Okay, so I think it's fair to say that what is going on in the Middle East is escalating to some extent. There's certainly a lot more activity going on. The attacks that happened against the Americans yesterday has clearly escalated things. I can imagine, being ex-military myself, there is no appetite for any sort of escalation with Iran. That is definitely not a theatre that I would suggest most people want to be going into full frontal. However, we do not know how that tinderbox could light. And I would suggest that when we look at all these factors, this and the other geopolitical issues that are going on, don't forget Russia, Ukraine, I know it's kind of taken a sideline right now. These are the issues which, for me, are the disproportionate downside risk, which are things that could trigger things going the wrong direction. So right now, escalation is going up. Don't forget, we still have all of the shipping, or significant amount of shipping, diverting around the base of Africa, which is going to add on more cost to a lot of goods. We might see a load of goods disappear, and is that going to hit inflation figures as well, and therefore feed into MPC decisions? And then finally, on a UK national basis, unemployment. So it's interesting. I'm just going to go over to, I Googled this morning, and I just Googled job losses. And these are the headlines that come up. John Lewis planning major job cuts over 5 years. Job cuts and consolidation dent altnet ambitions. Newton job losses were felt far and wide. Steel workers in Port Talbot, huge job losses. Games industry losing people. Google bosses warn staff to expect further job cuts. We obviously, there are some significant employers talking about job cuts. And if you sort of follow those breadcrumbs, at the moment, these things will not be hitting the employment data. But when we read between the lines, you're seeing a lot of employers talk about it. Is this indicative of where we are in the economy? So regardless of what the GDP is coming out at, because don't forget, one of the pieces of analysis we've done a lot is we've got GDP, but actually what we really care about is GDP per head in the UK. So if the GDP is on the increase, but actually when you look at the GDP per head, we're decreasing, it means our population's going up and per person we're becoming less productive. And that's the position we're at. So how long term is that sustainable? The answer is I do not know. And I do not know if these are isolated, job cuts, and if other things are being created, because I've not done the research to that. So again, I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on the job cuts, because when you look at the actual data with jobs, we're still pretty much historically at a low unemployment rate. I think we're still at 4.2 or 4.3% in terms of unemployment, which is way below historical averages. Now, yes, this data is completely flawed. We know it's flawed. We know the ONS has said that they're not getting the level of respondents they need from the usual channels to create this data set. So therefore, they're using experimental data based on RTI, real-time information data that's pulled from payroll providers. So we have no idea what's actually going on with this right now. it's very difficult to make an assessment of where we actually are with the jobs and the unemployment market. The one thing we have seen, and I did have this out, but I for some reason I think I've missed it, or I think it's come off. What we have seen is the vacancies come down a lot. In fact, let me just quickly Google it. If I go unemployment data and vacancies, because I think that's, as a leading indicator, is the most interesting thing that we can look at. Right, if I can find it. These things are never easy to find, are they? Here we go. Sorry about this. There we go. Here's the one. So this is the vacancy survey from the ONS, and we can see the continued downtrend of vacancies. Now, let's not forget, we're still above the normal vacancy rate, okay? So we obviously spiked down, then we had a big surge after COVID when people, what clearly happened with COVID is a lot of people left the workplace, and so therefore a lot of companies have been advertising to fill those slots of the people who never came back after COVID. As the economy is softening, there's less requirement to bring on more headcount, and so that vacancy rate is dropping steadily, and it is a pretty steady line. And for me, that is showing where we are going right now in terms of the economy. So that's something we need to watch. But when we look at the actual, these are earnings, you can see how we are effectively above. So we're in real-time earnings growth. But if we look at the payroll employees, monthly change minus 24,000, it's not huge. Quarterly change up 0.1 PPS. This is the experimental data. It's not really showing massive unemployment. In fact, there we go. 4.2 is the unemployment rate. So it's not showing massive data. So that is something that we need to keep an eye on, because remember, this for me is the second trigger, is high unemployment. And for me, it's the thing that is also going to be the linchpin of the UK housing market over this year. If the economy stays just stagnant, right, and there's not massive job cuts, then there's not going to be massive forced sellers out there. And so therefore the UK property market will not go and crash. If the economy tumbles off a cliff, which there are no signs right now that it will, by the way, I would say there's no concrete data that we're just about to implode. I think we're clearly going to be creaking with the interest rates as they are, but that is a lever that the bank has the ability to pull when they need to pull it. If we do see the mass unemployment, which I don't believe we will do, that's when we will see large property price falls. And I know there are a lot of people out there on YouTube sphere and all that sort of stuff who are kind of, I feel are finding selective data, finding things like the unemployment or redundancies going on, grabbing onto it and going, right, this is now widespread, the whole economy is about to topple and the whole property market is going to go with it. I'm not, right now, looking at it, I'm generally not convinced. I'm not saying it won't, I'm just saying the data, I don't feel, shows it, but the data is so inaccurate, right? It's so meaningless. Nobody knows exactly where we are. So where does that leave us? Where does that leave us in terms of the path that we are taking over the next 3, 6, 12 months? Well, a couple of weeks ago, the market were betting on a 1% drop in interest rate. So Bank of England base rate over 2024. So four quarter point drops. I don't feel I agree on that looking at it. I don't think there's a strong enough case that the bank are going to suddenly launch in and start slashing interest rates, because we have the push pull, and the positive things are being outweighed, well, not outweighed, probably counterbalanced by the negative things. I think there's still enough question marks for the bank just to want to sit on it and see where we are for quite a while. So I don't feel we'll get there to a 1% drop in 2024. Might be wrong. So therefore, I feel these push-pull effects, so we have, increasing affordability, ultimately, but we also have, more people coming off the fixed rate mortgages. These macro things, I feel, again, will just keep the market as we are, fairly push-pull, fairly stagnant, maybe with some slight drop. It could be a slight drop, slight rise. I think it's going to be fairly stagnant in nominal terms, but with continued real-term drops. I believe there is a skewed downside risk at the moment. And what do I mean by that? I think there's more chance of something happening, which for me would be that sort of black swan geopolitical event, which tips it into the large negative downside, rather than the opposite, which is we go back to significant growth in the UK property market in 2024. So I think the skew is to the downside, to the negative. I feel for it to go there, it has to be a third-party black swan event. I'm not convinced we'll get there ourselves, because we'll just carry on limping on this year. So that's where I believe we are right now. in the UK property market and the economy as a whole. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as we do it. By the way, if this is, I know I've not been live for a week and a half. I apologise for not going through this stuff in more detail over the last week. I would have broken it down more. But as you know, that I do this to help you empower the choices you make to take back control of your financial freedom. Right, that's what I specifically do. So I always ask a favor, and I ask for your help to get me out to more people, to reach more people, to help more people empower themselves to do the same. And the more people that are part of this channel, the more resources I have, the more I can put into it. So I don't have to go AWOL for a week and a half because I'm running around in Chester getting property developments up and running and all those other things. So all I ever ask is that if you find value from this and you think other people that you know would find value of this, please subscribe to the channel because that's the biggest metric that YouTube looks for when they're giving more reach, and like the video to help it get to more people. It's the only thing I will ever ask. So please, right now, if you're still on watching, please hit subscribe. If you are not subscribed to the channel, and please hit like on the like button. And what I am going to do is I'm going to go through very quickly the latest Zoopla house price index, because I think that gives us an interesting insight as to where we are right now based on the Zoopla data. Now, I really rate the Zoopla house price index because it's not an HPI like Halifax, like Nationwide, like the ONS. It's not a hedonic regression model. It's more a model that Zoopla have created. It's almost more like a crystal ball. Okay, so it shows us activity and then it crunches that data and gives some predictions. So Zoopla are fairly bullish. It's a fairly bullish HPI for January. So you can see in the title, they've got house price falls are slowing as more sales are being agreed in the first weeks of 2024. Okay, this is good news for the housing market. We if we look down at the graph, we've flatlined in terms of Zoopla's HPI. So there's no drop from December to January. So we're sitting there. What's all property 264,400? It was the same in November. So this is November to December's 264,400. It was only in October 264,600. So really in 3 months, gone down £200 a property. Not an awful lot. There are some caveats to this though that I would like to highlight. If we look at this, it's very clear we have a north-south divide in what's going on in the property markets, right? We've known this for a while because we know that if we draw a line down the middle here and we go up, it's actually with the increase in rents that we've seen over the last 18 months. It's probably still cheaper, even with current interest rates, to go and buy a property to live in than it is to rent a property. Whereas clearly down south with higher capital values, it's going to be affected more. The other thing to note is that we look at the annual percentage changes. We have a disproportionate skew for Northern Ireland, with Belfast being 4% up year on year. And then the next two hot spots for annual percentage change are Glasgow and Edinburgh. Again, two hot cities. I know they're hot because I've had some calls with people from them recently. So the top three are out of England. So there is definitely a skew from England versus, I would say England and Wales versus Northern Ireland and Scotland. And then if you look at the English cities, okay, we've only got a handful that are in the green for annual percentage. The vast majority are in the red, and interestingly, Aberdeen is minus 2.9%. But we've got minus 2.7% Southampton, Portsmouth, South Coast. Now I know they boom because I live near there. So anyway, my point is we have to understand those regional variations and understand where the skews are, rather than just looking at this, which is an average for the whole of the UK. So that's the first thing to mention on this. They talk about buyer demand rising at the start of 2024. And again, I would say sentiment-wise, I can feel in the water that people have some more confidence. There's some confidence on its way up. Now, in fact, what I will do, I forgot to get this, is UK PMI data, because I did want to talk about this. If I go, I don't want manufacturing PMI. I want the composite PMI. So for those of you who don't know, PMI is the Purchase Managers Index, and it is effectively a survey of purchasing managers, and it's seen as a very accurate prediction of what's going on in the economy, okay, for the future. So if I go onto line chart, as we came down here sort of mid last year, it was starting to look a bit ugly for the economy, and there was some talk about it actually dipping down a lot lower than it made. Just for interest's sake, if you don't know, and in fact, I'm just going to go back here so it's a bit more clear and zoom in for you. Is it going to zoom in on the chart? You can't really see, but this scale here is 50. So any reading on the monthly PMI above 50 shows the purchasing managers who have done the survey believe that we're going to be in growth going forward, right? And if it's negative, we're going to be contracting as an economy. So over here in the middle of last year, we were under by quite a long amount, right? And August, September, it looked like it was going to start capitulating, and that would be a red flag for a recession. However, November, December, and now January, well, in fact, October. So we've seen a trend from September upwards, the trend, but the last 3 months in a row, we've been above 50. So that shows quite a lot of confidence, I would suggest, coming back. Now, whether that proves to be misplaced confidence or not, I'm not sure. But there's lots of other surveys out there as well that are showing confidence increasing, right? And if you think about it, you think about affordability getting better for people. It's been a torrid sort of 18 months to 2 years for people in terms of that affordability. It feels for a lot of people, it certainly feels for me, like there's light at the end of the tunnel. Affordability gets better. Now, again, this is perception. I'm not saying it is getting better. Food's still going up. There's still loads of things going up, in terms of a lot of price. But utilities are way down, coming down. Mortgage rates are coming down, swap rates coming down. That's going to affect perception and consumer confidence. And if people feel they have more money in their pocket, they're more likely to go out and spend stuff. I would suggest, and again, when we look at the actual figures, I don't have the graph in front of me, people are spending more in terms of a monetary value than they were, but on less items, which is probably obvious because of the inflation we've had. So things are more expensive. So we're spending more, but we're getting less for our money. That's fairly obvious. But as inflation comes down, that will start to even out. Anyway, let's go back to Zoopla. So we can see this confidence come back, but it's not like this is an isolated thing. If you look at every January, you get this big spike in demand as you come out of the Christmas period into January, right? And January rolling into the spring is always the most buoyant part of the property market. So yes, we have a spike here, just like we had a spike in Jan 23. The spike has taken us slightly higher, okay, on the demand index, but I wouldn't say massively, but we do have an uptrend. If you look at where we were in 21, going into 22, look at how high we were in the demand index. So we are nowhere compared, to where we were a couple of years ago. And if we track back, we're doing less than we were pre-COVID lockdown, and we're kind of just doing, better than we were in 2019, which was not a great year for the property market. So demand has seen a strong rebound, but we have to put it in context that we're still sub 100 on that measure. All of the other metrics Zoopla are saying are up year on year, right? So they're showing a lot of positivity. So buyer demand up 12%. Number of sales agreed, big one for me, 13%. Flow of new supply. People are starting to put their properties back on the market. Stock of home for sale is going up. Now, this is interesting because what this is saying to me is that the market is unfreezing. Remember in the last quarter, the last half of last year, we talked about the fact we're just frozen. We're in paralysis. I feel it's unfreezing. Now, when it unfreezes, when we have more liquidity in the market, more transactions going on, chances are, right, if somebody needs to sell and they need to sell quickly, they're going to have to be much more realistic with their prices. So more stock on the market is going to force those sellers who have been maybe holding out because there's been a lack of supply, maybe they're now going to have to get more realistic. So does that mean we now see a nice little, I say nice little, that's probably the wrong word, a dip, okay, in sales prices as we unthaw? Or will it go the other way and actually buyer demand goes up loads and we go up? I don't think that's going to happen, because if we look at the buyer demand's up 12%, but the flow of new supply is up 14%, and the stock of homes for sale is up 12%. So the flow of new supply and the stock, the increase of flow of new supply, the increase of stock of homes for sale is outstripping the buyer demand at the moment. So we'll see what happens with that. However, we are definitely unfreezing. What else do we have? The only other thing to leave you with before I go into Q&A is one of the reasons that we have not capitulated in the housing market is affordability has improved. Okay, so if we look at the affordability charts, right now, look at London. So London was up at probably over 14, it's almost 15 times earnings, and now it's down what's that, 13. So that's a decent percentage drop in terms of affordability. We've seen, South excluding London come down. We're seeing affordability improve across the board. Now, why is affordability improving? Yes, house prices have kind of largely stayed stagnant for the last year now. We haven't seen that big crash, but that's nominal house prices. If we look at real house prices, they have crashed, right? They've crashed. We talked about it. They've crashed almost 20% since the peak. So with that crash in real house prices, right, flatline in nominal house prices, but wage growth, so flat nominal house prices and nominal wage growth going up means affordability improves. Crash in real house prices, but flatline real wage growth means affordability. So the affordability has improved for people. For me, this depends on where interest rates settle. I've talked at length about the theory behind the biggest driver with house prices long term on a macro scale is where global interest rates are going to settle down. So it looks like we're turning the corner, okay, in terms of that outlook of where we are. It looks like we're at the top of the tightening cycle. The question is, how far do they go? Do they come down and settle in the 3 to 4% range? Or is inflation going to undershoot and interest rates going to end up back at low levels? That's the big question. So when we're looking at a macro level over the next 5, 10, 15 years, that's the answer that we need to know. Where are we going to end up with interest rates? Because that will be the long-term thing. If we end up sitting at 4.5% interest rate, right, for the next 5 years, we will not see any sort of return, or I do not believe we'll see any sort of return to big boom in housing market. People out there talking about property doubles every 10 years. No, it doesn't, right? Fact, wrong. Depends how you want to skew the statistics. I would say, no, it doesn't. I think that's factually wrong, unless you're spinning statistics. If, however, for whatever reason, we see interest rates drop off, I think we'll be back to the races with property prices going up quite rapidly over the next few years if we end up with cheap debt again. Okay, that's where we are. That's my thoughts. Lovely. All right, let's see what questions we have, team. I'm going to go through them. By the way, give me a thumbs up if there's some interest there. Hello, everybody. Sorry, I'm just going to go through these as I see them from top to bottom. Stuart says, not expecting large nominal falls, flat market through to 2026. Stuart, I think we probably agree on that after my summary. Tor, prices flat through early 24. Yep, then tanking when Labour gets to number 10. I'll put that in. I think that is actually an interesting thing as to what will be the fallout of the election. The answer is we just don't know at the moment. I think we'll see some short-term stimulus in terms of, policies from the Tories when we get to April budget. The question is when they are out. I can't see a rabbit being pulled out of the bag now. When they are out, are they all just going to get reversed anyway or not implemented? So that's something to watch. Man, how you doing? Teddy B, we'll see stickiness in April with the NMW. Sorry, you might have to. I'm feeling a little bit tired and brain fogged at the moment, so you'll have to help me with NMW. With the UK being a service industry economy, it'll have a greater impact than other countries. Yeah, that's a fair point. Tor, Biden says he's selected option of response to Iran will want to be seen as being strong on electoral season. I put that on Tor. Yeah, look, I get it. As I said, nobody wants to go full frontal conflict with Iran. It's a nasty place with an anyway, let's not go down that route. So we'll see what happens with that. But it's definitely, for me, that's the disproportionate downside risk, right? That is could or have the impact to drag everything down very rapidly. Jimmy, do you think that the Tories will bring in 99% mortgages? And if so, how do you see that impacting the housing market in the short term? I've got to be honest, I've not done, because I've been so busy over the last couple of weeks. I've not had my usual eye on all of the detail that's coming out of everybody's mouths and all the rubbish that's being spewed out. It's clearly something that they're looking at. Will they bring in 99% mortgages? Well, ultimately, anything that improves affordability will have an impact on house prices. So, I always talk about houses are worth what somebody can pay for them at the end of the day. So what you can pay for it depends on what you can borrow. If you can borrow more, you can pay more, and therefore on a macro level, house prices go up. So anything that stimulates that, anything that enables you to afford more or borrow more, and of course, if you can only get an 80% mortgage, now you can get a 99% mortgage, you can borrow more. So that will, I think, without a doubt, stimulate demand. Whether it pushes it back up in the short term is another question, because what you could find is it just continues to prop the market and we go stagnation. It's the same as 30-year mortgage, 40-year mortgage terms. It's the same as Bank of Mum and Dad giving deposits. All these things increase affordability. You can borrow more. Interest rates coming down means you can borrow more for the same, or you can afford more. Sorry, you can afford the same monthly payments for more amount of borrowing. So yes, all of these things will artificially inflate the market. And don't forget, I would suggest most of the Tories want the property market to continue going up. The property market and the UK economy are intrinsically linked, right? They are symbiotic with each other. It's probably the housing market and people moving, and therefore all the money they're spending on, new furniture, new TVs, new electrical, new white goods, new stuff for their house, decorating, DIY, extensions, roof, all of this sort of stuff. All this money that people spend is all dependent on people moving from home to home to home to home. So yes, I believe nobody wants it to go and crash. Okay, what we got? Robin, OPEC caused the recent oil spike. Yes, they did. Yes, because they throttled it in there. US and Canada now producing massive amounts of oil and gas. OPEC no longer has monopoly. There could be further tax cuts as an election carrot. I think there will be further tax cuts. I agree with you, Robin. I think that's what they are going to come out, because don't forget that they're going to have a lot more money to play with as we go into this budget than they probably thought they were going to 6 months ago. If you just look at the sheer amount of money they were servicing on the debt pile, as well as covering the losses of quantitative tightening policy, which basically, because the bank have been, say Bank of England, not the bank, the central bank has been selling off bonds at a loss due to where interest rates are. The government treasury has been covering those losses. That's an agreement they had. As the yields fall, effectively, that means they don't have to do as much. They've got more money to play with than they thought. Inevitably, they'll do whatever they can to try and get some form of manifesto to get re-elected. Tax cuts and property market are clearly the easiest places to hit with that. So Alexi says, chance of Miraz, or will it be too costly for the taxpayer? I'm going to put that on. You're testing my knowledge here, because I wasn't a homeowner in the 90s. But let me just get this right. Miraz was the ability for a residential homeowner to offset their interest costs against tax burden, as far as I'm aware. Is that correct? Can somebody confirm that with me? And therefore, I believe that was removed, was it early 90s, and therefore caused one of the sort of run-ups and booms in demand and property prices, people trying to buy before that was removed. Would it be too costly for the taxpayer? I've not seen the figures, and I've not seen it mooted, actually, so I'd be delighted to have a look at the figures on that, Alexi. It's a really good question. Teddy says, what about repossessions? Yes, so Teddy, repossessions and arrears data comes out quarterly. I'm expecting the next set for Q4 of 2023 to be out next week or the week after at the latest. And when it comes out, that'll be something we'll be looking at. Because as you know, if you watched any of these before, in quarter 3, we were seeing a fairly consistent uptick in residential arrears. Nothing, wasn't catastrophic, but uptick, which we would expect to see. We were seeing a catastrophic uptick in buy-to-let. So the buy-to-let sector is really being hammered. There we go. So yeah, Robin talking about markets starting to normalise, 100%. China in trouble domestically, flooding export countries to cheap products. Solar panels have already halved in price. And I think this is something that I think people are, we have narratives. So look, I'm trying to think how to phrase this. There are a lot of people who are commentators on social or on YouTube whose narrative has been inflation, it's here forever, we're all screwed, it's all lies, they're making up the data, which of course is, it's great for eyeballs on videos and all that sort of stuff. But the reality is, right, it's not all some big tin hat conspiracy theory. I'm not saying things are not manipulated. Of course they are. Of course people have agendas of what they're trying to achieve. I'm not saying that in the slightest. Those are obviously things that happen. But we're not just going to sit there in massive inflation, forever, because a lot of it was supply side shock, right? So with the supply side shock, we're going to have that constriction of supply. That's going to push prices up. We then had various other things that have happened, like, for example, in the car market, the semiconductor, crisis, when that came in and completely destroyed, supply of cars, which rocketed their prices in the second-hand market. And then, what's happened is we're now getting back to normality, and actually, we've probably got oversupply of stuff. And if we, because people are tightening because of interest rates and, potential recession or flatlining, people are tightening, they're spending less. We now have an oversupply of goods and people not buying them. So of course that means goods are going to have to come down. So we talked a couple of months ago about, are we going to go into a deflationary period? Are we going to overshoot it massively? Could happen. John saying, let's put this on, oh, blimey, we're getting loads of comments here, team. John, the change in property markets are hard to call as there's so much moving information. If you can identify real value in relation to rental yield, that's the main principle. Love it, John. You've summarized it better than I could have done myself. So I thank you for that. I agree with you. It's hard to call, which is why my prediction is roughly stagnation. It might be a little bit up, it might be a little bit down over this year. I don't see it going anywhere massively unless we have a third party, a black swan style event. And don't forget, right, the last major crash we had, 2008, was a black swan event. It wasn't just it wasn't just a gradual thing that then capitulated. It was a very, very acute event. And that was 2008. And then the last dip we had was what, in the 90s, sort of late 80s into early 90s. And that was a big, old, horrible, proper recession with mass unemployment. We're not in that position. I don't think we are in that position. And those are the last two big property crashes that we've seen in the last 30 years, really. I don't feel we've got the organic elements for that unless we see another black swan event, which of course can happen, right? And I think we have a lot of fragility in the system. So that black swan event could topple things over. But if it doesn't happen, I think we'll kind of flatline. We'll come out of it. People are limping along, come out of it, and then we will get back to some form of growth at some point. So yeah, that's my thoughts. But as you say, so look, last year, 2023, turned into a fantastic year. I've done deals I'm buying. We've got offers out at the moment. We're in negotiations for properties at the moment because there are some fantastic buying opportunities right now, especially in commercial, mixed use, or any style of investment property that is valued on a commercial basis. Because with interest rates at the highest, because of the inverse relationship between yield and value, commercial property values are at their lowest. So there are some fantastic opportunities for those who have to sell now. Those who don't have to sell will just weather it out, right? It's a paper loss. There will always be people who have to sell. So you've got to find those diamonds in the rough. Find the motivated sellers, and there are out there, especially in investor or institutional sellers, not residential, but investor who just want to get out for all the various reasons, right? There's fantastic opportunities out there that we can get great yields, especially when we can force value appreciation recycles, what I always talk about. In fact, that segues beautifully, John, into something I did want to talk to everybody about before I end today. So one of the things that I've been very busy with recently, sorry, John, I'm just going to take you off. So I can talk about this. One of the things that's been keeping me very busy over the last couple of weeks is I've launched a community. It's a property community. It's specifically for property investors, people who are looking to buy these sort of properties and invest in these sort of properties, larger, higher cash flowing, higher yielding properties that work in the current environment where the opportunity is that I feel. It's what I've been buying for the last few years. Okay, it's called the Property Unicorn Club. I just want to very, very, I hope it's all right with you, very, very quickly talk to you about it and what the Property Unicorn Club is all about. And if it's something you are interested in, it's a very, very affordable investment level to join the community. Let me put it in now. Let me come off Will's post there, and I'll start here in the classroom. This is something I've had a vision to launch for a very long time, and it's my vision to create a powerful property investment community, which is affordable but gives you 100 times return on the monthly, basically, membership price. And it's split into several sections. We've got trainings, so you can see here we've got quite a lot of trainings, property training videos. But where the real power is every month we go live and I do a monthly masterclass where I teach you live what's going on in the property world and what's working right now and strategies and all that sort of stuff. And we also have every month a live coaching session with me. So I'll come and coach you. So it's your ability to get coached by me on property. We also have a very powerful and very active community that we are now building, and more people are joining us every day. And the whole point of the community is that there's opportunity, there's support, there's accountability. Okay, and because it is a paid-for community, it attracts people who are serious about what they're doing. So there's opportunity for finding deals, buying deals, investing, and just building your property business. And it's all based on engagement. Okay, so we have abilities to, the more you engage, the more points you get. The more points you get, the more cool bonuses and unlocks and stuff you get. And then we have leaderboards, and every month on the leaderboards, those at the top of the monthly leaderboards get hot seats on the coaching sessions, right? So I get to personally coach you face to face. So if it's something that you think would be a benefit from you in your property journey, and I know it's not going to be for everybody at all, but it's specifically for property investors, there's a link in the description that tells you a bit more about it. And I'm going to put a link in the comment section as well, which I'll pin to the top after this video so you can find out about it. It'd be great to see you in there. It's just monthly membership, less than joining a gym, and it's no commitment at all. So the very worst you can do is come on, consume all of the information and trainings we've got there, be coached by me for a month, and learn some cool stuff, and then cancel. And for the next, we've got founder membership, so about the next 20 people who join, it's half price for life as well. So have a look at that. Right, we've probably got time for one more question. So Richard says, don't ignore the fact that 1.8 million people still have to come off their cheap mortgages. Yeah, we talked about that, Richard. I think I said 1.6. So we might be slightly out, but going into 2025 as well. Sorry, Teddy, national minimum wage. I told you my brain was not working. It's what happens when I'm on hour 6 of live trainings so far. So John, another one from John. Let me put this on, and then I am going to call it a night. There is a rash of vacant offices now coming onto the market in the UK, much the same as what's been happening in the US. This really could be the start of the slide, the clear out. And here, I believe, is the opportunity in this sector. I think it's a fantastic opportunity. For anybody who wants to get into property, this is where the opportunity is. So I look forward, for those of you who want to pick my brains more about it, to do it inside the Property Club. Property Unicorn Club. Right, team, I'm going to wrap it up from there because I've been on for over 50 minutes now. So we're past my 45-minute cutoff. It's been a pleasure. NPC meeting tomorrow. It's going to be a dull non-event, so I'm not anticipating I'm going to be going live tomorrow to talk about it. But of course, we're going to be going into February, so we're going to start to get a snapshot of what's been happening in the last month with the indices. Nationwide will be out first, probably on Thursday. So I'll probably try and go live on Thursday and break down a nationwide HPI. Until then, have a great couple of days, and it's good to be back in the hot seat. I'll see you in a couple of days, team. Oh, that's not even the outro. It's been like a week and a half. Honestly, a week and a half, and I don't even know what buttons to press. It's because somebody's changed my buttons. I'll do the outro now. See you, team.